Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 86. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we are going to be going over an H team, because I was bored. I mean, there are some synergies between the Pokemon that start with H, but some of them kind of overlap with each other, and it is Regulation H, so theoretically the letter H should be the most powerful letter, but let's just get into it and see if that's true or not. Starting off with our Houndstone here, of course we got to be running that Last Respects on Houndstone, as it previously was a signature move, but then Basculegion got access to it. But our Houndstone, other than the Last Respects of course, is going to be mostly a support Houndstone, as we have the Will-O-Wisp for hopefully burning the opposing Pokemon, or we can side Will-O-Wisp into our Hariyama, as we'll talk about eventually. But we can also go for the Howl in order to boost the physical attack of not only our own Houndstone, but also our Hippowdon and our Hariyama in order to increase their damage. And we have the Ally Switch just in case we need to buy a cheeky turn by swapping our two Pokemon, or if we're in open team sheets and the opponent sees that we have Ally Switch, it's gonna maybe make them think about trying to click a super effective move into a Pokemon that we have on the field, because we could just Ally Switch it away. But since we're using Sand on this team, we're going to be using the Sand Rush on Houndstone in order to make it super speedy, and makes it also easier to get off our support moves, and we have the Focus Sash so that we can always at least take a one hit. Next up, we got Hippowdon, and Hippowdon is going to be our Sand Setter with the Sand Stream, and we're just going to be rocking some Ground-type damage and the Earthquake in order to give us some spread damage, since we do have two Levitate Pokemon and a Pokemon that can protect. Not so much Hariyama and Houndstone there, but they know it was for the cause. Just in case we don't want to go for our spread ground type damage, we have the Stomping Tantrum on Hippowdon, which can also double if our previous move failed. And we have two moves that have 5% chances of failing, because I'll never understand why 95% accuracy is a thing in this game. But Fire Fang and Ice Fang both are just some tech moves that we have on here for countering things like grass types or other ground types directly. As well as we have the Clear Amulet on Hippowdon so that it is not losing any of its attack boost that maybe Houndstone is giving it due to things like Intimidate, and Terra Steel, because Steel gives us a lot of good resistances. Up next, we have Hariyama, and this is going to be our first Guts Pokemon. We could just go over Guts. It's a 1.5 times attack boost whenever we have a status, which usually you use a Flame Orb with a Guts Pokemon because you'll get the burn at the end of the turn, but we're using a Hariyama that benefits from holding an item not just to activate its ability in the Assault Vest, and we have two Pokemon on the team, which is Houndstone and Haunter, that both have the Will-O-Wisp in order to side proc the Hariyama's Guts, so we can make Hariyama ideally really tanky because it has the Assault Vest, and then hopefully it can take out all the physical attackers with its boosted damage. And on Hariyama, we just have the Fake Out in order to perhaps get the Will-O-Wisp off into Hariyama and stall us a turn. We also have the good Stab Drain Punch in order to keep us on the field for longer. We have Heavy Slam in order to do good Steel type damage, since Hariyama is a fairly heavy Pokemon. And we have the Poison Jab just for hitting those fairy types that might be switching in on Hariyama. Next up, we have Hydreigon, and this is a pretty simple Hydreigon set, as we're just looking to dish out Draco Meteors, which is our stab dragon damage, and also the Dark Pulse, which is our stab dark type damage. And then whenever we terrestrialize into Steel in order to resist fairies, we can go for the stab Flash Cannon into the opponent, and we're Life Orb because I didn't want to do choice specs on this Hydreigon, so that way it has a little bit more options for defensive play. And we don't have to worry about our ground weakness whenever we go Terra Steel, because we are Levitate, as I mentioned before. Next up, we've got Hydrapple, and this Hydrapple is more support orientated, as we have the Giga Drain for dealing our best grass type damage, but we also have the support moves in the Breaking Swipe to hopefully lower the opponent's attack on both of their Pokemon, to maybe keep Hariyama around for longer since it's more special tanky. We also have the Pollen Puff that we can side throw to any of our Pokemon in order to heal them up, but also 90 base power Pollen Puff is definitely nothing to scoff at if we're trying to attack an opposing grass type or dark type. And with the Super Super Sweet Syrup, we're more guaranteed to land some of our moves that have poor accuracy, such as Houndstone's Will-O-Wisp, or Hydreigon's Draco Meteor, or Hippowdon's Fire Fang and Ice Fang. And we also have the leftovers in order to give us some more healing over time, and we're Terrafire mostly so that we can resist things like Fairy-type moves and Ice-type moves that were previously doing super effective damage to us. And last but not least on this team, I decided to slot on Haunter. It was almost Hatterene in this last slot, but it's kind of harder to use Hatterene when you don't have a good redirection Pokemon. So we're slotting on Haunter, who gets to hold the Eviolite in order to increase its defense and special defense, as that's where all of our investment is going into. We also have the Clear Smog on Haunter in order to get rid of the opponent's stat boost, or we can get rid of our own stat drop. But since we're ideally playing this team in open team sheet, we are trying to use the Trick Room with Haunter in order to enable our slower Pokemon like Hippowdon, Hariyama, and Hydrapple. But since Haunter is a fairly fast Pokemon, since we don't have any speed investment, but we're still hitting the 115 speed, we can threaten the option to go for Destiny Bond in case an opponent is definitely going to be able to take out Haunter on turn 1. We can Destiny Bond with them, and then that puts us in a much better position where we take out one of their big threats very quickly. And we do have the side Will-O-Wisp in order to, not only since we're fast, we can go for the Will-O-Wisp into the opponent if they have a physical attacker on the field that's slower, or we can side Will-O-Wisp into the Hariyama. And lastly, we're Terra Grass on the Haunter, mostly just so that we're not getting put to sleep by powder moves like Spore. And we're Levitate, of course, because that's Haunter's only ability, but it also allows us to dodge ground-type moves, which would be super effective against us. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the H team. Let's get into some battles. So first up, we have what looks to be a bit of a Dancer team, as they have the Oricorio and the Lilligant from the Toad Trio video that we did where we were using Dancer, but they also have the Flamigo, maybe for some stat copying, and Smeargle could go for any dance move that it wants. But the opponent does lead Oricorio and Espeon here, which I was not quite expecting, as we lead Houndstone and Hariyama, and the Oricorio immediately goes for the Quiver Dance, and the Espeon copycats the Quiver Dance, which is pretty smart, because now Oricorio gets to technically copy its own Dancer with its Dancer ability, and is now really set up, as we Howl with Houndstone, and we get the Heavy Slam into Espeon, at least dealing some good damage into it, and I Terra Water Hariyama here, because I didn't want a Flying type move going into Hariyama, or a Psychic type move going into Hariyama, and I thought that it could take 2 special attacks here, but actually because the Espeon's using Copycat, it also gets to copy the Revelation Dance after Oricorio uses it, so Hariyama unfortunately takes 3 special attacks there, but we at least get to Last Respects away the Umbreon, or the Espeon, not Umbreon. But Flamigo comes in and it gets to copy the Oricorio, and it immediately Terra Fightings, but Revelation Dance goes into Houndstone and brings it down to the Sash, and Flamigo is able to be faster than Houndstone even though we have the Sands set up right now, and they get off another Copycat, which means that Hippowdon is going to catch the 2 Revelation Dances, but because we have some dead Pokemon, we get to Last Respects the Oricorio, and the Sand is going to take it down at the end of the turn. So now it is Flamigo and Lilligant at the end here. We protect Hydreigon because I figured Flamigo was probably going to throw a fighting type move into that slot, but Flamigo actually goes for the Copycat instead, so it doesn't get to hit, and we don't knock out the Flamigo here, but thankfully the Lilligant Petal gets into Hydreigon, and Flamigo takes the Sand Chip at the end of the turn. So actually I don't think it mattered what slot Lilligant Petal Danced into there, because Hydreigon would be perfectly fine just to click Draco Meteor into Lilligant here. But the Dancer Copycat strategy was definitely a neat strategy that I don't ever think I've actually seen before, and I kind of wish I could steal for the 128 teams challenge, but unfortunately we have all the rest of the teams planned out at this point. Here we have what looks to be a Delphox Expanding Force team, but they also have the option to go for the Murkrow Rain with Basky Legion and Archelodon, and Sneasler can Psychic Seed in order to speed boost on the Indeedee's terrain. So we lead Houndstone and Hydreigon here, as the opponent leads Sneasler and Indeedee, which is good and bad for us because Hydreigon can easily handle Indeedee and doesn't care about Indeedee, but Sneasler can go for a close combat into Hydreigon and just flat out clap it. But what we're going to do here is we're going to have Hydreigon protect so it doesn't get hit this turn, as Sneasler actually goes for a Dire Claw into it for whatever reason, but we get the flat out Will-O-Wisp into Sneasler as Indeedee goes for the Expanding Force, and it doesn't do quite enough to actually 2-KO the Houndstone here. I go for the Ally Switch, hoping to catch a close combat on this turn, but they go for the Dire Claw again. Not quite sure why, but now Houndstone is in range of the Expanding Force, as we see the Indeedee is in fact a Focus Sash. So Hydreigon is immune, but Houndstone is going to get clamped by it. But now we can bring in Hydrapple to activate the Super Sweet Syrup, and we go Terrafire because I didn't want to lose Sneasler to a to lose Hydrapple to Sneasler Dire Claw, and we just get to Dark Pulse away the Indeedee, since Sneasler with the burn probably isn't doing too much, and we can just afford to Pollen Puff up Hydreigon for any damage that it does take. And now the opponent brings in the Delphox, and they swap out to Basculegion here as Delphox goes for the Heat Wave into both, looking to maybe just chip Hydreigon, since if their last Pokemon is Basculegion, they're gonna be struggling to deal damage into Hydreigon is the way it looks, because the Sneasler doesn't want to click close combat for some reason. Basculegion goes Terra Water here, as I protected Hydreigon and Hydrapple here, because not only did I not want the Sneasler faking out into Hydreigon, since we are a Levitate Pokemon, we're not benefiting from the Psychic Terrain, but I also did not want the Basculegion to just click a Water type move into Hydrapple. But the Basculegion actually locks into Lash Respects the way it looks, which tells me that the Basculegion might actually be banned here. But they take some Burn Chip, and Hydrapple takes some Healing Chip, and I swap in the Hariyama here to perhaps take one attack, as they go for the moves that they just went for, but Hydrapple gets off a really crucial Breaking Swipe here into both Pokemon, and we can just full on fake out into Sneasler here, and they try to Last Respects Hydrapple, but Hydrapple takes it pretty good because of that attack drop that we put on them, and the next Breaking Swipe gets to pick off the Sneasler, and at this point they can Last Respects Hariyama, and we can Giga Drain Basculegion, not quite taking it out, but definitely making it very difficult for Basculegion in order to take out our Hydreigon endgame. And if the Last Respects crit there, I probably would have lost my mind, but we're good on that front because we have two Pokemon, so the crit didn't matter there if the Last Respects crit did happen. Here we have what looks to be the banned Gliscor team that has the snow on it, and then Gliscor goes like an ice type in order to not take a lot of hits but also do a lot of damage with its choice band, and Hypercutter makes it difficult to intimidate and deal with it, so very, very powerful team here. But the opponent leads Vivillon and Gliscor, as we lead Haunter and Hariyama. And I believe in this game I had Taunt on Haunter just because I wanted to test it out, but that later got changed to Destiny Bond. But we faked out the Vivillon here as the Gliscor goes for the Earthquake, and Haunter is Levitate, and Hariyama takes some damage. And I really should have gone for the Trick Room here if I thought Vivillon was going to get faked out and Haunter wasn't going to be hit by the Gliscor. Then we could have Trick Room set up for a while, but Incineroar comes in and intimidates the Hariyama, and they just go for Hurricane into Hariyama in order to take it out. And I tried Will-O-Wisping into the Gliscor in order to decrease its physical attack, but that doesn't seem to quite to work out. They swap in Ninetales here, but we swap in our Hippowdon, which allows us to actually regain the weather, and we go for the Howl into Houndstone and Hippowdon in order to hopefully start exerting some physical pressure here. Now we swap back into Hunter, and they do Freeze Dry into the Hippowdon, but Hippowdon takes it pretty okay. Unfortunately, they do knock off into Hunter, which Hunter at least takes, and we get the Earthquake with Hippowdon, which is going to take out Incineroar, but it's not quite going to pick up the KO on the Ninetales. And now they bring in Gliscor as we Terra Steel with Hippowdon, because I thought an Ice type move would go into that slot, but actually a Flying type move ends up going into the slot, so we catch that anyways. We get the Ice Fang in order to take out the Gliscor here, as Ninetales only has one turn left because of the sand, which means that Houndstone can just Lash Respects into the Vivillon now that all of our friends are dead. And even if that Blizzard landed, I very much doubt it would have taken out the Hippowdon, but it does take out Houndstone, as Hippowdon did not need to land that Fire Fang. The sand again would have taken it out, but thankfully Hippowdon did. Up next we have another snow team, but this time they have the Titan, and they also have the Clefairy for the redirection, so the Titan can get very dangerous if it decides to start belly drumming. But also the tanky Corviknight endgame can really be a problem if it starts iron defensing, because none of our special attackers can really afford to hit it too well, and we can't even clear Smog it with the Haunter because it is a steel type. They start with Ninetales and Incineroar here, as we start with Haunter and the Hariyama, and they get the Intimidate down into us. But I swap in Hippowdon in order to get rid of their snow here, as they decide to protect Ninetales for whatever reason. They get the knockoff into Haunter, but unfortunately Haunter doesn't quite take it there because it's not the greatest EVLA Pokemon. But now we get to bring back in Hariyama for free as they bring in the Clefairy, and we swap in Houndstone as I wanted to start howling or at least side proc the Hariyama's guts, but they bring in back Ninetales, and the Drain Punch isn't going to do too much because of the Ninetales' Snow Boost, and they Helping Hand into Ninetales here, and they flat out go for the Blizzard. Maybe thinking that we would swap back in the Hippowdon, but we at least get some heavy slam damage into Clefairy, not quite enough to take it out. And now we bring back in Hippowdon in order to stop their Blizzard a little bit more, or at least make it to where Hariyama could take it, but it actually misses both Pokemon, which is great for us here, so we just get a free Drain Punch into the Ninetales. And now they bring back in Incineroar, who does intimidate Hariyama, but not Hippowdon. And Hippowdon is in a really good spot now that Ninetales is gone, because we can just start dishing out the ground-type damage with our Stomping Tantrum, and Hariyama is going to go down at the end of the turn because of our own Sandstorm here. But now we just get to bring in Houndstone for free, and Houndstone, being super fast, gets to get that last respects in order to take out the Incineroar, and the Stomping Tantrum is going to finish off Clefairy, and their Pokemon in the back is revealed to be Titan, who we can just Terra Steel our Hippowdon in front of in order to burn it, and the Ice Spinner doesn't even do enough damage into Houndstone in order to take it out, as the Sand Chip brings them low enough to where they eat their berry, but we can just click the last respects as Titan tries to go for the Earthquake, which will take out Houndstone, but not quite Hippowdon, and Hippowdon crits the Stomping Tantrum, but I don't believe that crit was necessary at all. And lastly, we have a game against a Maushold Annihilate team, where this team doesn't have great ways to deal with Annihilate, but we do have some ways to mitigate it at least. Oh, they start the game with Maushold and Annihilate, and we start the game with Haunter and Hariyama here. And I decided to fake out the Maushold, and they bulk up here. And I decided to go for the Trick Room, which I think was a bit of a misplay, as maybe I could have just Destiny bonded with Haunter, but the problem is now that we're in Trick Room, it's kind of likely that Haunter is slower than the Annihilate, since the Annihilate can afford to be more bulky and not have as much speed investment whenever it's paired with the Maushold. But we full on just Drain Punch into the Maushold in order to get rid of it, and they Rage Fist Hariyama, and they do get the crit here as we side activate the Will-O-Wisp on Hariyama, but they bring in Sinistcha, who is a Ghost type, so unfortunately we can't Drain Punch our health back, and we get Heavy Slam damage into Sinistcha, but the Sinistcha is also Rocky Helmet here, so we're gonna take enough Rocky Helmet chips that we're not going to get knocked out at the end of the turn, as maybe we might have lived the Machigacha because of our Assault Vest, but now we have to bring in the Hippowdon, who's going to go for the Terra Steel to maybe resist the Machigacha, and Fire Fang into Sinistcha, and Sinistcha at least flinches because of the Fire Fang's chance to do that, but they Rage Fist into our Haunter, and Haunter full-on just does not take it here. So I protect with Hydreigon because I want to stall out the Trick Room, and we Fire Fang the Sinistcha so that they can't set up another Trick Room, but they have a whole Pokemon in the back that we haven't seen yet, and it is Archaludon, which Hydreigon is going to try to Draco into Annihilate, but it's just not going to be able to do enough damage, and the Archaludon is just going to Draco us back on the Hydreigon, and the Drain Punch from Annihilate is just going to finish up the game there. But I think this is a game that really kind of shows off the weakness of trying to use Haunter in this role, because you are faster, but if you try to set up the Trick Room for your slower Pokemon, then whenever it's faster than other Pokemon, it'll be slower than other Pokemon, like the Annihilate. And Haunter didn't even take the 50 base power +1 Rage Fist there from the Annihilate, which is definitely more of a problem. Also, I think in games like this, it's much more beneficial to have the Houndstone endgame. As you saw, we were pretty able to get through the Maushold, and that was really the only thing that was stopping the Houndstone from succeeding, except for maybe like Incineroar. But if you're bringing Incineroar, then you're not bringing Maushold, Annihilate, Sinistcha, and Archaludon. But yeah, that was the Reg H team, and I don't think it's that great. It's probably one of the lower tier teams that we've made here, just because I've been forced to use Pokemon that all have the H at the start of their names, and the only real synergy kind of feels like it's between Houndstone and the Hippowdon with the Sand mode, and then our two Levitate Mons are able to dodge the Hippowdon's Earthquakes. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video, and even consider subscribing, because both of those things would help me out an absolute ton, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.